Humanities and Social Sciences alumni speaker, Bailey Boland. Bailey, please come up. Certainly, Bailey's list of accomplishments is much greater than her short bio in the program. If you're curious where that is, that's on page 16. If you haven't looked already, take a look now. If you don't know her, you might be able to piece together by that bio that she's a young scholar with an already distinguished past and an equally bright future. A communications analyst, writer, and doctoral student, also probably most proud being a feminist activist. She's very proud of her book, Haters, Harassment, Abuse, and Violence Online. In this book, she questions the motivations behind sexist activities and explores methods to reduce the footprints of internet misogyny. She is also the creator of the literary journal, Leaves and Flowers, a regular contributor to numerous print and online journals, including Line Zero, and editor of Involution, stories, poems, and essays from the first 2 years of Line Zero. After earning her Bachelor of Arts in Creative Writing, magna cum laude, at Ohio University, she came to us to earn her Master of Arts in Rhetoric and Writing. And she's currently working towards her PhD in Rhetoric and Writing at Bowling Green State University. I was blessed to be able to work with her for a short time directly as her thesis chair and while she was a student at UF. And I can say with authority that Bailey has a keen academic mind, a talent for writing, and a work ethic second to none. What I find most special about her is her ability to excel in putting theory into practice. She is an activist in the truest sense of that word, a compassionate scholar who strives for positive humanistic change based on thorough researches of the realities of our status quo. Today, it's my honor to introduce my fellow scholar, my advisee, and my good friend to Back to UF, very deserving of this year's College of Arts and Humanities Social Sciences Outstanding Alumni, Ms. Bailey Boland.
Well, thank you, Ron, for that wonderful introduction. I am going to potentially undo a little bit of that praise as we talk, but we'll see how it goes. So, good morning, everyone. I'm very, very excited and honored to be here with you today. As I get started, I would like to thank Dr. Ron Tully for nominating me to speak today. Sherry, who is not here because she is on vacation in Europe, don't we all wish we were, for helping coordinate my time here, and to all of the Rhetoric and Writing faculty, staff, and students for having always been in each other's corners. I'm immensely grateful to be able to be here to speak with all of you today, and that would not have been possible without the support of many people along the way. So I'm going to reintroduce myself briefly and then tell you a handful of stories. As Ron mentioned, I'm currently in my second year of the Rhetoric and Writing PhD program at Bowling Green State University. My primary area of interest is archival work, with a particular focus on young women's literacy and rhetorical practices as they've been enacted outside of classroom or academic settings. Right now, I'm gearing up to finish coursework and prepare for my preliminary exams. For those of you who plan to go on for a PhD program, I cannot tell you how clearly enough how fast this time actually comes. It feels like I was just starting at the University of Findlay approximately yesterday. And with that, I'd like to go back to that time for the first of my stories. When I started the Master of Arts in Rhetoric and Writing program here at the University of Findlay, I was working full-time. I had found a job as a marketing analyst for a local company, which felt like a pretty good coup for me. My bachelor's degree is in creative writing, and I had spent my entire undergraduate career hearing how impossible it would be for me to find a job, much less a job that actually used my writing skills. So I felt really lucky to have the job that I did, but I also found myself really excited by the prospect of starting the MARW program when I saw an article about it in the Courier. There were a couple of reasons for that excitement. I loved my job, but I wanted to keep learning about writing. At the time, I'll be honest, I was not entirely sure what the rhetoric part meant, but I was game. I also knew that some of my tuition was going to be covered, and that I would get a raise when I finished the degree. So my plan was get the MA, get the raise, and continue developing in my professional career, taking on additional marketing and copywriting responsibilities. You might be able to tell from those introductions and the end of that last sentence that things have not turned out exactly the way I was originally planning. So I started the MA, all excited about writing, unclear on rhetoric, but ready and willing to learn. And of course, I became fascinated by rhetoric within about 20 minutes of starting my first class. I continued on through the MARW program, taking my sweet time about it because I was working full-time and could only manage to take a class or two each semester. As I'm sure many of you know, 40 hours of regular work each week and intense graduate level study are challenging to balance. During that time, though, I heard relatively often that I should consider going on for a PhD, that it seemed like the PhD path would be a good fit for me. I remained pretty committed to my professional career, but as time went on, I found myself listening more and more intently to the stories of my friends who had graduated and gone on to various PhD programs. They were doing work I found fascinating, while my own marketing work had become less fulfilling. I found myself looking at two potential paths where before there had really only been one. As I sat in what could have been my very last student orientation, I thought, what if I just keep doing this instead? And that was how I found myself applying to PhD programs. And then eventually letting my wonderfully supportive boss know that I would be leaving the company to start at BG. I'll tell you another story. During my time here in the MARW program, I developed a profound interest in studying the online harassment and abuse of women. That interest turned into a seminar paper, a couple of conference presentations, as Ron mentioned, a published book. It's called Haters. You can totally buy it. And my thesis project, during which I read thousands upon thousands of comments left on news articles. Yes, I read the comments on purpose for a long time. I was interested in this topic because I had experienced online harassment, because I had been seeing many other people experiencing online harassment, and because I found it interesting and valuable to track and unpack the rhetorical strategies being used both by harassers and by the targets of that harassment. Each of the statements of purpose I wrote for my PhD applications mentioned this research as my primary focus, while listing a handful of others as secondary interests. Again, if you remember my introduction, you might start picking up on a trend here. You see, during my time in the MARW program, I had also taken a class that introduced me to archival research, and I was secretly a little bit obsessed with it. However, I was feeling really committed to my pre-existing path. I had already done so much work on harassment that it seemed like a betrayal to even acknowledge that I had other interests. Then, when I was at a conference hosted here at the University of Findlay shortly before I started at BG, I attended a session focused on graduate student research. The experienced scholars at my table shared a piece of wisdom that I ended up finding freeing. One woman said, "Take your first year and just explore. Don't feel like you have to tie yourself down to something right away, but explore everything you can and see what grabs you." I decided to take that advice. I did a little bit of everything my first year. I learned some HTML and CSS, I composed a video essay, I wrote a seminar paper on rhetorical theory, I started revising my thesis project into an article, and I did an archival research project. While I loved everything I worked on, I reached a point where I was comfortable letting myself acknowledge that archival research was really where my interests were leading me. Since that time, I've done more writing on that first project and designed an independent study that is allowing me to combine some of my digital and archival interests. I still have a foot in both camps, but archival research has taken the lead as I continue figuring out who I am as a scholar. Okay, one final story, and then I promise I'll tell you what all of this is getting at. Now, because I was working full-time while I was in the MARW program, I did not teach until my first year of the PhD. I can now say from experience that it works out, but that at least for me it was a little scary, or a lot scary. Here's why. For my entire life, I had been convinced completely and utterly that I would dislike teaching and also be very bad at it. My mom, who's here, has been saying to me that I'd make a good teacher ever since I can remember, and so has basically everyone else. You'd think that might have been some kind of a sign, but I managed to miss it for a really long time. I started at BG in the fall of that first year, feeling uncertain in my research interests and terrified of what was going to happen when I stood up in front of a classroom. To no one's surprise but my own, I fell in love with teaching immediately. And if comments from my students are to be believed, I'm not too awful at it. Although I was certainly fumbling my way through teaching my first classes, I very quickly realized how enjoyable it could be to work with students on their writing the way so many instructors have worked with me on my own. Even this year, when I've had the opportunity to take on some different assistantship work, I find myself thinking about how I want to teach my classes next time I'm in that particular role. I have an ever-growing folder of teaching bookmarks and half a dozen course ideas in various stages of development. Okay, so what is the point of these stories? Why did I walk you through multiple scenarios where you might reasonably conclude, wow, this woman has no idea what she's doing? Well, that kind of is my point, in a way. Not that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, because I often have quite firm ideas of what it is I want to accomplish. Get an MA and become a superpowered marketer, or research online harassment all the way through my dissertation, or flee into the hills when everyone realized I would actually make a terrible teacher. My point is that my ideas of where I once thought I was going and where I have gone look very, very different, and that that's okay. The message I want to leave you with today is that it's okay if your plans change. It's okay if you take a risk and do something that scares you a little, or a lot. It's okay if you find a new interest that you decide you really want to pursue. It's okay to stay open to other possibilities, even when you think you are 100% entirely sure of exactly where you're going and how you're going to get there. I had a conversation with my mom not long ago about the difference between how she learned to navigate when she was first driving and how I learned to navigate, which was using GPS technologies. We talked about paper maps and how you would have to plan out a route ahead of time. Imagine. And that you still had to be sensitive to the possibility that something would change along the way. You might hit a ton of traffic. A road might be unexpectedly closed. Your timeline for where you wanted to go might change. You might decide that you wanted a different destination after all. In those moments, there would be no helpful voice emerging from your car speakers to reroute you or to tell you to take a U-turn over and over and over. In those moments, being able to identify and choose another path would be critical, even if it meant you ended up somewhere slightly different than where you were first planning to go. With GPS, we can just plug in an address and go where we're told. We're presented with a single path from A to B, and we never need to even think about what might be down the other roads. We often feel like we can just, or like we must, pick our paths and stay on them. We have the singular route before us, the emphatically highlighted road on the phone apps we're definitely not looking at as we drive. I'd encourage you, however, to pull over once in a while. Look at the whole map and see what other roads might be open to you. Sometimes the detour is the better route to where we actually need to be. Thank you.